Next, we're going to talk about beam palettes. And just before we begin, we're going to want to make sure that in our live screen, we are in the table view. And don't forget that your page left and page right arrows will allow you to see a lot of parameters. And oftentimes it's the beam parameters that get left off the screen, so don't forget to use that. Let's go ahead and say clear, sneak, enter. We'll let those guys go back home. So now I'm going to say group 5, full enter. I'm going to tilt those up on stage. And in form, I'm going to set my zoom to be 26 degrees. Don't forget you can get the zoom parameter on the command line by either using your encoder button, by touching the parameter name, or by using your parameter tiles. So that zoomed those out. I'm going to go ahead and make that sharp as well. So we'll take our edge in, and I'm going to put in a gobo. And let's pick our bars gobo. I'm going to go back to form and adjust that edge. Great, so I'm going to take that and say select last, record, beam palette 1, enter. Now if I use my arrows to look over, you'll notice that all my parameters in my beam category got stored in my beam palette 1, not just the 2 parameters that I had touched. So we're going to use some command line filtering to store just the parameters that we want. So let's say select last, shift image, record beam palette 2, enter. And if we arrow back over, you'll notice that just the parameters that are in my image category are stored into beam palette 2. Another way to look at this is to go into blind. I'm going to hit format to make sure we're in table view. And I'm going to type beam palette 1, enter. And if we look at group 5, we can see again, this stored all of those parameters. However, if we hit next, we'll look at beam palette 2, and we only have the information for my image parameters. And that means when I apply beam palette 2, if my zoom and my edge were set, or any of my other parameters, applying this beam palette won't knock those parameters out. Let's go a step further and just record an individual parameter. So back out in live, I'm going to say group 5, gobo select. Again, there are multiple ways to get that parameter onto the command line. Record beam palette 3, label bars, enter. And if you look at your live screen, you can see that bars shows up as my label for gobo select in those channels. And I also want to record my zoom level from this. So I'm going to say group 5, zoom, record beam palette 4, label 26 degrees.